Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing a recent proposal to add denying the Holocaust to the criminal code. Professor Moon, I was recently watching a Senate committee hearing on this issue. Joanna was one of the people presenting on that committee, but there was also Kara Zwiebel from the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, and she articulated some concerns around potential unintended consequences of adding this crime to the criminal code. Do you have any concerns about that?
Well, I think a couple of quite different concerns. So one of them is Holocaust denial. We have an idea of what that is, and we generally understand it as someone who is motivated by a desire to completely deny this fundamental wrong that was perpetrated against the Jews in Europe by the Nazis. But to talk about downplaying and other sorts of verbs like that, one doesn't kind of know how large or that category might be. And of course, there are the very cynical individuals like Ernst Zundel who knew exactly what he was doing when he denied the Holocaust. And then there are a lot of less sophisticated people who pick up and buy into sort of stupid ideas and express them in vague ways. Would this law extend to them? I have no idea. And the other thing that I'm struck by, of course, is the problem we've seen in other contexts, and that is different groups, of course, in our community understand that fundamental wrongs have been perpetrated against them. So one talks about and can think about the Armenian genocide or the Holodomor, for example, or the genocide against Indigenous peoples in Canada, in fact. Will there be some understandable desire for other groups to say, me too, we ought to be included in some way because wrongs were committed against us without denying the singularity of the Holocaust? So I think these are a couple of things I could imagine being concerns or fallout.
Yeah, that's an interesting issue, Joanna. Do you think that there is some argument that, today it's a proposal to ban Holocaust denial, but next year we could criminalize, have the government criminalize some other speech that is maybe disagreeable or objectionable, but maybe subject to more debate or more questions. I mean, there's no question about the Holocaust, but there's other contentious social issues and contentious histories in our country that may be subject to more debate. Do you foresee that being an issue?
I don't want to speculate. I think we're talking about Holocaust right now, and I do think it's singular. One point that Kara Zwiebel from the CCLA raised at committee that I thought was a very important point was that criminalizing Holocaust denial raises the specter of having to relitigate the historical record on the Holocaust. If somebody is actually charged under this provision, they will bring in defense, and the government will have the burden of proof. And it could also feed into conspiracy theories by demonstrating how the government is wanting to control the narrative. And so I think we should really think through practically how this would be enforced and what we would have to do to open this up for enforcement.
Yeah, we certainly wouldn't want our courts to be used as a platform for giving these conspiracy theories a platform in the courts, literally. So I do share that concern as well. Professor Moon, one of the things that struck me was that there is this carve-out in the proposal not to criminalize Holocaust denial if it's done in private. What can you say about that, and if what your thoughts are on if that would be an effective carve-out?
Well, the existing criminal code provision concerning hate speech does prohibit willful promotion of hatred other than in private conversation. So that is something we're already familiar with. And it's really meant just to limit, I suppose, what we might understand to be the intrusiveness of the law into more intimate family, friendship conversations. And so it's understandable, which is not to say that hatred can't be spread. In fact, often is in those relationships precisely, but they don't have the same public visibility and the same concern. So I think that's understandable. I think courts have had to contend with that exception before. I was just going to pick up something Joanna said before. I don't know whether a court would do this, but in the Zundel case, which was about Holocaust denial, there was, in fact, effectively initially a litigating of whether or not the Holocaust occurred. Although a court of appeal later said the trial court ought to have taken judicial notice of the Holocaust as a historical fact so that it was not the subject of litigation. The only issue would have been whether Zundel knew that what he was saying was false, and a jury found that.
That makes sense. We've got to go to commercial break, but we will be right back.